And it's Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services, Talking Business. Today we have a chance to talk with John A. Ward, who is a 27-year executive of the Chase Manhattan Bank, illustrious career in bank services, done some great work on foundations and New York area organizations. John, great to chat with you today.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. John, tell us, let's start. You're working, we met again through the Chase Alumni Association. You've got an event honoring Art Ryan, a colleague from Chase, who I know from Providence College. And tell us a little bit about this organization, the Chase Alumni Association.
Well, we have 1,500 members, and you have to pay to be a member, which is pretty unique because many corporations have unpaid membership, but it isn't really, the people aren't motivated to come. And so I think, and by the way, JP Morgan Chase loves us, so they give us great rooms for these meetings. It's absolutely terrific. So, but it's unique. And it becomes more unique because Chase has now, or JP Morgan has now used the Chase brand for its retail businesses. And so people who are younger and leaving or retiring join because they say, hold it, I can still have my relationship with Chase, with my friends at Chase. So originally it started a very different way. A lot of the senior people who ran the international department were moved back to New York because they wanted to restructure the bank. And when they came back, they used to meet in a bar, and that bar was the beginnings of the Chase Alumni Association, where people would talk about the interviews they had and talk about companies, and they could say, hey, I wasn't interested, but you might be in.
And John Ward, tell us a little bit how it started for you. And I know you went to Boston College and did internships in banking before you started your career. Tell us a little bit about your education and how you got into banking.
Well, I'm going to start from my first job. It was a summer job at First Boston, and I worked in the mailroom. And I did that for 2 years. And what I discovered there was I was delivering the mail. There were a lot of people making a lot of money. Now, in those days, an investment bank, if you made a couple of $100,000, that was a lot of money, because now we're back in 1963. So I did that for 2 years, and I did get motivated to try to get into banking. I then spent 3 years at Bank of New York. The first year, I worked for the operations manager and reviewed inventory and found out what levels of inventory we needed in the company. And I did that for the summer, and I learned a lot doing that. The next 2 years, I worked in the mutual fund area. And that's what we did. They hired a lot of smart people in the summer, and they could learn it as fast as hiring people off the street, but they had to train the people off the street because they didn't really understand as much. So we did that, and somebody would send in, say, I lost all my records on when I invested in this company, and we had to go back, look through the records of the mutual fund, and in those days, they weren't on a computer, they were on a wall. And I learned that, and that was good. They made me an offer coming out of college, but I went to Boston College, and I wound up being valedictorian of my class. So I decided to go on, and I got a Joseph Wharton Fellow at the Wharton School for an MBA. The next time I worked was at Chase. And I came back for the summer, worked in global credit, and did a case study on John's Bargain Store. So that became a training, something they used in their training. And I thought it was was an interesting project for me. Then I came back when I graduated. Now, I had an offer from First Boston, but I thought the banks would defeat the investment banks longer term. I was just 40 years too early, okay? Now we don't have Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns. It was, Merrill Lynch was taken over. It changed. So I was right, but I was wrong, because I could have been making $5–10 million a year if I had gone that route, but I didn't. So I joined Chase, went through global credit, and MBAs could do it in 15 to 18 months, and undergraduates would do it in 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. With an MBA, I think it could have been done quicker, but MBAs usually were looking at things from an investment point of view, and a bank looks at things of how certain am I to get the money back. So the bank, yes, they do look at cash flow, but they also look at asset protection. And can you get a lien on the assets, or do you hold the assets, such in certain commodities you might hold or at least have certificates in warehouses. So that was a difference between an MBA. And after that, I came out and I did something very different. I worked in corporate development. Corporate development did mergers and acquisitions for the holding company. So we weren't doing it for customers. We did it for the holding company. So one of the deals I worked on was Dow Finance. And when we were going through the proposals, and my first time presenting to the senior 5 people in JP, or at that time Chase, David Rockefeller was there. And David is manners personified. It was at 410 Park Avenue, where we used to entertain private banking customers. David walks across the room and introduces himself to me. Very valuable lesson I learned from David. So if you're the senior person in the room and you're having a business meeting, introduce yourself, because that breaks some of the ice that might be being formed. Now, the other thing that was interesting about David was his family is the largest shareholder of the old Chase Manhattan Bank. The Levitt family would have been the largest shareholder. So we had to go to David to say, are you prepared to give up that? And he said, if it's right for the company, I will do it. And that was another very good lesson, that some companies run as like family, kingdoms, rather than as maximizing shareholder value and doing what's right for the customers. We got turned down because we had our first real estate problem, and the Federal Reserve in Washington said, you can't run your bank, how can you run this company? They sort of threw out an idea, which is, well, you're consolidating business, but nobody drives 90 miles to get a small loan. So there were no branches near our branches. So that's how I met David, and that's what I did coming out of the credit training area.